everything about your computer and everything about your phone. This is the reality. Okay, you have these lovely things here, and we're going to be with you today for a couple days and share some wonderful things. When you go on this adventure with us, try to keep a really open mind. Try to let go of everything you know. This is the best thing to do, to experiment with discovering what this is. It's not really anything overly extraordinary. It came out of the text. It's not something that Bhante Vimalaramsi thought of or anything like that. It's not his technique. This is strictly the Buddhist technique. And it's just something that kind of got lost in time. It was very easy to understand how it was missed. I'm Sister Kema, or Reverend Kema, or Venerable Kema, whatever you'd like to call me. Some Venerable Sister Kema. All these things. Different countries call me different things. Actually in India, I'm sort of the Mata Bhante Ji. That's what they called me in Mumbai. So I go along with this. If you can hear what I'm saying, that's all I'm really interested in, okay? So for the next couple days, we are going to try to observe silence, okay? We are only taking 6 precepts. The last one is interesting. You'll find that's very interesting. The 6th one. And this is something you can add in your life if you like or not. When I say to let go of everything when you are investigating this, the reason is because if your cup is empty, you can get this very fast. But if your cup is way full, and I think a lot of people are going to have a pretty full cup, because I've been talking about who's coming and what's going on here in this area, so that's fine. It's just that you need to identify, and we'll help you do that. But we're only here 2 days, that's the catch. But we'll try to help you to just let go of some of the habits that are from other practices so that you can do this really purely. Because if you come to us and you're green, we find out, meaning you don't know anything, we find out that this works extremely fast. And it matches the texts, and it matches the experiences described in the text, and it matches the results in the text that people talked about. And that's what we're all fascinated with. We're a group of people who like to investigate and question a lot. And we went to the texts first to find out what it is that we wanted to understand what it was he found, but we wanted to see where it comes from in the texts. So that's where I come in, because I became a Bible thumper. That's what we call it in the Christian Bible Belt, where you have scripture chase. And I didn't have other people on the mountain after the initial 6 of us broke up. I was the only one on the mountain, so I built a discussion group online, and they became my class. And I became their student, so they could ask questions, and I was forced to go and find the answers. So that's how I got trained. I've been doing this for, this is the 20th year. I can't believe this. I've been ordained since 2006, wandering around with him, learning to teach, examine, dig, and get the questions that you ask answered. Okay, so what we've been doing the last year is a Q&A combination where we couldn't get the questions for a long time from people, and so we used a system of sticky notes that are on the chair. We're told that you guys will ask questions. That's what we're told, but normally speaking, the way to get Asian people to ask questions is to get rid of the shyness and timidity by simply giving them sticky notes and saying, write your question on the sticky note, stick it on the back of the board. My job is to collect the sticky notes and create a class that's short before the Dhamma talk. Then you get your questions answered during the retreats, and if I can keep up with you. That's the catch. Okay, because the last retreat, everyone believed this was real, and they all asked questions, and then there were 40 people asking one question a day, so this was difficult to weave together and try to get answers. I'm still answering questions. So this is what we're about. We're kind of unusual, and definitely we're Americans, yeah. So we're very nosy. We want to know how everything works. We weren't originally Buddhist, so we didn't grow up with the stories. And so we had to incorporate, learn who all the players were and all the places in the text. So when you study the suttas with me, or with him, you're learning about the places and the people and who was doing what and how was the training set up with the Buddha and how did it work and who taught what. It's endless. Anyway, so here we go. This morning, what we do first each day is we do the morning refuges and precepts and Dhammapada verses. I like it when people call this chanting, but it's not. It's sort of just our little service in the morning. And it's very simple, and it's very American probably, I guess, but when I come over here, actually, we do the same short service using the Pali, but we're going to do this in English for the couple of days here. So the group starts, and my shill is in the back. Oh, okay, you're going to be the shill, okay. And you ask, wait a second, I can't see. This is another thing about getting old. Okay, oh, wow. Okay, go ahead.
Bhante, please give us the 3 refuges so my mind will become peaceful. Thank you.
Please sit with your back straight and calm your mind, and now repeat after me. I now take refuge in the Buddha. I now take refuge in the Dhamma. I now take refuge in the Sangha. For the second time, I take refuge in the Buddha. For the second time, I take refuge in the Dhamma. For the second time, I take refuge in the Sangha. For the third time, I take refuge in the Buddha. For the third time, I take refuge in the Dhamma. For the third time, I take refuge in the Sangha. The question.
Bhante, please give me the 6 precepts so my retreat will be of great benefit and my mind will be peaceful. Thank you.
Please clear your mind and pay close attention, then repeat after me. I undertake to keep the precept to abstain from killing or harming living beings on purpose.
I undertake to keep the precept to abstain from killing or harming living beings on purpose.
I undertake to keep the precept to abstain from taking what is not freely given.
I undertake to keep the precept to abstain from taking what is not freely given.
I undertake to keep the precept to abstain from wrong sexual activity.
I undertake to keep the precept to abstain from wrong sexual activity.
I undertake to keep the precept to abstain from telling lies, harsh speech, gossip, or slander. I undertake to keep the precept to be loving and kind to myself, earth, and all beings. Now you have taken the 3 refuges and the 6 precepts, and these lead to happiness and peace. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Now let us read the verses of the Dhammapada together. Mind is the forerunner of all evil states. Mind is chief, mind-made are they. If one speaks or acts with an unwholesome mind, because of that, suffering follows one, even as the wheel follows the hoof of the draft ox. Mind is the forerunner of all good states. Mind is chief, mind-made are they. If one speaks or acts with a pure mind, because of that happiness follows one, even as one shadow that never leaves. He abused me, he beat me, he defeated me, he robbed me. In those who harbor such thoughts, hatred is not appeased. He abused me, he beat me, he defeated me, he robbed me. In those who do not harbor such thoughts, hatred is appeased. Hatred is never overcome by hatred in this world. Hatred is only overcome by love. This is an eternal law. In the unessential, we imagine the essential. In the essential, we see the unessential. Anyone who entertains such wrong thoughts never will realize the truth. What is essential, we regard as essential. What is unessential, we regard as unessential. Anyone who entertains such right thoughts will realize the truth. Here one develops a mind that rejoices now, and in the future one rejoices. In both states the well-doer rejoices. One who rejoices a lot will be able to see the purity of their own deeds, speech, and thoughts. When one is happy now, they will be happy in the future. In both states, the well-doer is happy. Thinking, I have done good in the past, one becomes happy and will easily experience a blissful state of mind. Though a person recites the sacred texts but doesn't act accordingly, that heedless person is like a cowherd who counts others' cows. They have no share in the fruits of the holy life. The person recites sacred texts very little, but acts in accordance with the teaching. They give up lust, hatred, and delusion. They truly know what is good, and this leads to a mind that is free from suffering. They cling to nothing here and in the future. In this way, one shares the fruits of the holy life. Okay. Now, normally in the mornings, when we start this, we bow 3 times. When we finish it, we bow 3 times. Okay? So we'll bow 3 times at the end of it. And normally when the teacher comes in, we all stand up, and then we sit down again. It's good exercise, right? It's very good manners. Okay, so I will tell you just a tiny bit about this because we're going to run close to time. The precepts are set up for one particular reason. They are a protection system. When we go back in the text, if we go to the Dvaita Vitakka Sutta, number 19 in the Majjhima Nikaya, we find that the Buddha was doing something before he was enlightened that gives us a hint what he was doing on his search. He was really examining everything. And in the Dvaita Vitakka Sutta, he was examining specifically what it would be like to live my life on this side with unwholesome thoughts and words and actions, or to live on this side with wholesome thoughts, words, and actions. When I read the sutta, I've read it hundreds of times and had children, and I can tell you it reminds me of a science fair project in 6th grade science fair project. Very simple, like float and sink, that kind of thing. And he spent a few weeks, he tells the monks, living here, and nothing worked out, and nothing was functional. And he works over here, and everything works, and everything's functional. And what it tells me is that he figures out that this must, later on, he probably reflects on this and other things he's taught. It really makes sense to keep the precepts. Why? Because, if you had a car, and it had 5 fluids in it, to operate the car, you would have gas and oil, and you would have brake fluid and steering fluid and transmission fluid. Does your car run 100% efficiently if you're low on any of the fluids in your car? No. So if your name was Mike, and I would say, well, the Mike model of human being has 5 precepts, and if you keep the precepts, then you don't have any problems. The interesting part about the precepts is that today in Buddhism, a lot of the Sunday school programs, for instance, in Sri Lanka that I was involved with, don't teach the children from the beginning the interrelationship between these 5 precepts and these 5 hindrances that we talk about in meditation. It's like they keep the hindrances away from the education system until they start to get serious about the meditation. Then they introduce the precepts as if there's something only for meditation. But don't you have a problem with lust and greed in life? Don't you have a problem with hatred and aversion? And don't you have a problem with sloth and torpor at work? And don't you get hit with restlessness in life? And do you ever have doubt happen in life? And what's interesting to me is the kids at 7 to 9-year-olds can understand this really completely. In my class, I got permission to teach them together as a testing thing to see what would happen. And they really understood the next week when they came back, if they could tell me this was happening of the hindrances, what did I do that made it happen, that I broke in the precepts? And they were able to talk to me about it. So this was something I brought up to them about the design of this thing. This isn't very functional today because the kids are really smart. And they understand this very easily, how this works. So it's interesting for us to look at, evaluate the precepts because they work just like the car. If you're low on gas, you can't go on the trip. If you're stuck in the jam and you don't have brake fluid, it's not going to be too good. You see? If you lose your steering fluid and you're in some parking lot and you're trying to maneuver to get out of the parking lot, you're in trouble. Well, it's the same thing with the precepts. And these things compound and stay inside us. So this is why these precepts are so. The first one is obviously not killing or harming living beings. We throw in on purpose because we had a student get neurotically upset for stepping on ants on the way to the garage. And I'm there. Well, you don't have to make sure you don't step on anything, anytime, anywhere. We have to be more practical, okay? And then the precept to abstain from taking what is not freely given happened because of a lot of things that happened in Afghanistan, where things were forcibly given. And it would be nice if this was only about freely given, you see, and not forcibly given. So this came into play. And then undertaking the precept to abstain from wrong sexuality is grossly misunderstood. It means basically there are suttas, I can't remember to tell you exactly which one. I'm not going to quote one right now, but there's 3 or 4 suttas that tell you the whole set of precepts. Okay? And when it talks about wrong sexual activity, what it's talking about is not, if you boil it all down, and you'll hear me talk about the ice cream cone logic, Mr. Spock's logic or Dr. Spock's logic, where it says, if this isn't true and this isn't true and this isn't true, well then down here is the answer, right, at the bottom point, okay? So when we look at this, wrong sexual activity, the bottom point of this is don't do anything with anybody that's going to cause mental or physical painful feelings, okay? Because that's going to cause a problem for you and the other person and the people around you. So it's not just don't covet your friend's wife or husband. It doesn't just mean that, but it also means don't do anything with children that are still living with their parents. This is what's right in the description. Don't have any sexuality with somebody who's too young, still living with their parents is how it's identified. Don't do anything that is going to be with another person's mate or partner, because you're just asking for trouble, right? And then the other one is not boiling it down to not harming yourself or anyone else it's not consensual with the other person. But we're also talking about the parents of the two couples, the two people, and the grandparents, and it goes on and on, especially in cultural setups where the family extends outward. You see, we're looking at that too. So it can be a very grievous situation for you if you marry the person where the mother didn't want you to marry the person. And you have to take it into consideration what you're going to live with the rest of your life in your marriage, if that's what happened. Okay, the next one is to abstain from using recreational drugs. Let's do this one. Abstain from telling lies, harsh speech, gossip, and slander. This one's interesting because we were amazed to find out how many people didn't know what gossip was and they didn't know what slander was. So slander is when you're dividing people, and that's all you have to remember about it. You don't tell a story about her because you want the job with me, and tell me a story about her that isn't true so you can get the job. But it goes larger and expands with groups and neighborhoods and towns and everything outward. It's a big problem. The other one is gossip, is just don't repeat things that you hear from someone, because unless you got it from the source, the best way to think of it is, I can talk to you about this as long as that person is standing right here. Then you can talk to the person, talk to me about the person. But if the person's not there, don't be talking about that person. Harsh speech, easy to understand. Unfortunately, this is a problem because the language is breaking down in some countries. America is a very good example of harsh speech turning up on the radio, the TV, books, stories, movies, everything. And so it becomes, why isn't it okay to use all of this harsh language? Because you're going to feel bad afterwards, and that's something you have to experience for yourself. And telling lies goes as far as any lie. And the one description is where the Buddha sits down with Rahula and he explains to him the white lie. And he says the white lie is the tiny, tiny, tiny little lie. One little lie. You may as well disrobe. Just disrobe. You've ruined your holy life. Because once you get involved in lying, it's almost just an impossible thing to stop the rolling stone of this whole thing. And so you just don't do it because of the kickback. And that's one of my favorite terms that I sort of invented, was karmic kickback. Because it's what happens. I don't know anybody over about 21 or 22 years old that hasn't had something they did earlier come back like this and kick them from behind. I don't know anybody over 30, definitely, who hasn't had this experience. And this is the karma coming around in the lifetime, in the same lifetime. Yeah, and we can identify with that. So you want to avoid this happening. Don't take the drugs and alcohol, because why? Because it clouds your mind and makes you break the other four of the precepts, okay, the other four of the five. And that's the whole thing about the drugs and alcohol. It wasn't there originally. There were four. And then we see it tumbling, we see it coming in, and obviously the problem was there just the same way it is here, that if you cloud the mind, then you will break the other precepts. The last one is loving and kind to myself, the earth, and all beings. We just recently added the earth. I think the Himalayas affected me, and what was beer is a great place to visit. Everybody's being pre-conscious, trying to be very conscious of the whole situation up there. The other thing that touched me was going to Amravati area where the agricultural communities are, and seeing some of the little tiny villages that I visited where I could probably just eat off the street. They were so clean, it was unbelievable. I had to ask the person who was the head of the village, did you do this just for the sake of the tourists to come and visit? And they said, no, it's nothing to do with that. It's just we like it. And they cleaned everything up. Even the cows like it there. Everybody likes it there. Everybody likes everybody. All right, so beloved, the real reason for this, that Venerable put this in here, was we hate ourselves in America. A lot of us hate ourselves. We just don't like ourselves. And we need to do forgiveness for ourselves and for other people. And the problem was we need to be loving and kind to ourselves before we give loving kindness to another person. And this comes back to, if I don't have a diamond in my hand, can I give you the diamond? I can't. If I don't love myself, can I actually love anybody else? I can pretend, but it'll keep folding over on me as it breaks down, and I get back to the fact that I don't love myself. So loving kindness, the idea of not sending loving kindness to ourselves before we send it to someone else, it's not because we're getting into loving ourselves. Don't misunderstand this. But we need to fill our tank up before we can share something with someone else. So it's a very logical thing to talk about it that way. And it's helped a lot of people to put this in there, to remind themselves to be kind to themselves. There's a lot of books right now being written by modern authors about compassion to ourselves before compassion to other people. And this permeates not just Buddhism. In the Christian world, the order was dictated, and the larger religions was dictated as God and myself, and then myself and my family, then my family and my neighbors, then the community, then the town, then the city, then the country, and then the world. But what we have, if somebody jumps off a boat and rushes to save the world, is we find somebody who burns out and gets exhausted. And why? Because they violated the order of things. And now we come to Buddhism, we find the same thing. So in order for us to be strong enough to do something to help with the construction of Buddhism as a monastic or as a person, we have to first work with ourselves and with the people around us, and then go from there. Okay? So Bhante's going to come in, so we all stand up. Okay.
So I'm going to give you the instructions in a different kind of loving kindness than you're used to. If you follow these instructions closely, you will have great benefit. If you add some of the stuff you've been doing before, that's going to stop your progress. When you practice loving kindness meditation first, you start by sending loving and kind thoughts to yourself. Remember a time when you were happy. When that happy feeling arises, it's a nice glowing feeling in the center of your chest. Please don't sit with your legs crossed. Thank you. When that feeling arises, then make a wish for your own happiness. You have to feel the wish. This is a feeling meditation. It is not a mental development meditation. You know what it feels like to be happy? Bring that happy feeling, put it in the center of your chest, and radiate that feeling to yourself. You know what it feels like to be peaceful and calm? You know what it feels like to be joyful? Whatever wish you make for yourself, feel that wish. Put that wish in the center of your chest and radiate that for yourself. After about 10 minutes, then you can start radiating to another person. But first start by radiating to yourself. While you do this, you are going to have some wandering mind. Your mind is going to go off and think about this or that. One of the things that I want you to realize, and this is kind of different from a lot of teachings, is that your hindrances are not your enemy to fight with. Hindrances are actually your teachers. They're showing you where you have an attachment. Why do hindrances arise? Because in the past you have broken a precept. It's just that simple. When you break a precept, you have a guilty mind. Your mind says, I shouldn't have done that. I know that was the wrong thing to do. And then you kind of forget about it. But when you come and you start meditating, this is the time that you purify your mind. So the hindrances are going to come up, teaching you where your attachment is. Doesn't matter how many times your mind gets distracted. If your mind gets distracted 25 times in a sitting and 25 times you recognize that your mind is distracted, you let it go, you relax, smile, and come back to your spiritual friend or yourself, that is a good sitting. It's an active sitting, but it is a good sitting. Now, I teach right effort, which is something that seems to be not as popular as it should be. Right effort is recognizing that your mind is distracted. Release the distraction by not keeping your attention on it. Relax the tightness caused by that tension. I'll explain that in a minute. Smile. This is not only a feeling meditation, this is a smiling meditation. The more you smile, the better your meditation becomes. That means while you're sitting, while you're walking, while you're eating, whatever you're doing. Smile. Now you smile in your mind. You smile with your eyes, even when your eyes are closed. That lets a lot of tension out of your face. A little Buddha smile on your lips and a smile in your heart. So smiling is a lot more to it than just pasting a smile on your face. Now, you're made up of 5 different things. You have a physical body. You have feeling. Feeling is pleasant, painful, neither painful nor pleasant. Not emotion. You have perception. Perception and feeling are always conjoined. They're always together. When a pleasant feeling arises, your mind says that's pleasant. When a painful feeling arises, your mind says that's painful. Perception is the naming of the kind of feeling it is. And it also has memory in it. You have formations and you have consciousness. Now, formations, at the start of any retreat, I tell people that's thoughts, because that's generally what it is. So, when a painful feeling arises, what happens in your mind? I don't like it. Now, please don't fold your arms. This is a thinking posture, not a listening posture, a thinking posture. So it's actually not very respectful to be doing this when there's a Dhamma talk. So, I spent 12 years in Asia going to all different kinds of countries and going to very famous meditation teachers and asked them the same question. What is craving? And all I got was, oh, it's desire. It's because you want something. And I was never really too satisfied with that. And I asked, well, how are you supposed to recognize craving when it arises? What do you look for? Well, just look for your desire. Not so good. How are you supposed to get rid of the craving? They never really answered that. Now, as I said, I went to a lot of different teachers. I went to Thai teachers. I went to Sri Lankan teachers. I went to Burmese teachers. I went to Cambodian teachers, although there weren't many of those around at the time. I went to Tibetan teachers. I went to Mahayana teachers. I really looked hard for 12 years to find out, well, what exactly is craving? And then I started going into the suttas to see if I could find out the answer, and I did find out. And it's in the simple explanation. Craving is the I like it, I don't like it mind. When a feeling comes up and it's painful, I don't like it. When it's pleasant, I like it. Okay, that's the very beginning of the personal self. I am that. In Zen tradition, in Mahayana tradition, they have this thing that they call the three poisons. It's lust, hatred, and delusion. Well, lust, I like it. Hatred, I don't like it. Delusion, I am that. So that's just another way of describing craving. Now, you have two lobes to your brain. You actually have more than that, but this is for practical purposes. In the middle of this is called a small gland, I know the name of it. It is a gland, okay. Called the pineal gland. Okay. Now this is, they call it in a lot of traditions, the gland of enlightenment. Okay. So, when you're doing the meditation, around your brain is called, it's a membrane is called the meninges. Every time you have a thought, every time there is a feeling, every time there is a sensation, your brain expands and goes out a little bit, and this causes a tension and tightness to arise in your head, in your mind. That is how you recognize craving when it arises. It's a tension and tightness in your head. In the Satipatthana Sutta, in the instructions, it says, you train thus. On the in-breath, you tranquilize a bodily formation. On the out-breath, you tranquilize a bodily formation. What does that mean? Now, in America, people think of the body as being from the neck down, and mind is from the neck up. But actually, it's from the top of the head down. So when it says to tranquilize on the in-breath and tranquilize on the out-breath, what is it saying to do? It's saying letting go of that tension and tightness in your head, in your mind. As soon as you do that, if you have, let's say, a hindrance come up and your mind is thinking this or that, and you recognize it and you don't keep your attention on it, now you relax that tension and tightness here. What happens is your mind becomes clear. Your mind is very alert. And your mind is pure. Why is it pure? Because you have let go of craving. That tension and tightness is how you recognize the tightness in your head. It's craving. And when you let go of that craving, now your mind is very clear and pure. And you bring that mind to a smile. Now, this is a smiling meditation, and I want you to smile all the time. Why? When you have a smiling mind, your mind is uplifted. Your mind becomes very light and very clear, and your mindfulness improves very quickly. Now, one of the interesting things that I like to do is give definitions of different things, because they're so misunderstood. So many different ideas, especially about a simple word like mindfulness. I went to a conference where it was a conference on mindfulness, and there was a day and a half of talking about mindfulness, but nobody gave you a definition of what it was. And I asked people, I said, when I got up and I started giving a talk, the first thing I said was, okay, you've been listening about mindfulness for a year, or a day and a half. Tell me, what's the definition of mindfulness? And nobody came up with any answer. So I'm going to give you an answer that works 100% of the time. It's not a maybe. This always works. Mindfulness is remembering to observe how mind's attention moves from one thing to another. It's the observation power of the mind. Some people like to use mindfulness as some kind of stick to control things and beat things away and stop things from happening. That's not mindfulness. Mindfulness is just observation of how mind's attention moves from one thing to another. Now, this will give you a much deeper kind of practice when you use mindfulness this way. Now, getting back to smiling. The more you smile, the better your mindfulness becomes. The more alert your mind becomes. The lighter your mind becomes. More agile. You're able to see things much more clearly. Now, I did 20 years of Mahasi Sayadaw kind of meditation. 20 years. I did a lot of retreats. And I wasn't too satisfied with the end results. So when I left there, I started going to the suttas and found out that the instructions they were giving me for that kind of meditation don't match what the Buddha said. Because they go by commentary instead of the actual sutta. That seems to be pretty relevant to almost all the different kinds of meditation that are being taught, at least the Buddhist kinds of meditation, but it's also has to do with all kinds of meditation. And the smiling keeps your mind uplifted. Even if you don't feel like smiling, if it's not a sincere smile, it doesn't matter. They've done studies in the University of Minnesota years ago on the corners of your mouth. Now that's an odd thing to do a study on, but they found out that when the corners of your mouth go down, so does your mental state. And when the corners of your mouth go up, so does your mental state. And later studies, they say, even if you don't feel like smiling and you smile anyway, that it changes your mind and becomes uplifted. It's like your mind looks at the corners of your mouth and said, well, you're up. That means that I'm supposed to be happy. Well, I might as well be happy then. And as odd as it sounds, that really is the way it works. Because I did so much meditation with this other kind of meditation, this Burmese style meditation, I developed a very somber mind. I developed a mind that was not particularly happy, but I was striving all the time and I was pushing. And then I started noticing when I was going in retreats, I did a lot of 3-month retreats, that when I'd walk into the meditation hall and I'd look at all the people that were meditating, they were all had these frowns and dark lines in their forehead, and they're really trying hard. Well, since finding out this other method, one of the biggest problems I have in teaching is to stop people from trying so hard. Okay? Lighten up. Your mind is much faster when you have a smiling mind than it is when you have a mind that's pushing and trying to force your mind to be the way you want it to be. It doesn't work very well. That's really true. I had 20 years of practice showing that. Another thing that especially people in India, they get attached to sitting on the floor. And then I say, well, okay, why don't you sit for a couple hours? Oh, I can't sit that long. Why? Oh, it's too painful. Well, stop sitting on the floor. Sit in a chair. There's no magic in the floor. When you have pain come up, what does that do to your mind? It's like a rock. I don't like it. Oh, it hurts so bad. Why don't I just stop? Well, I encourage people to sit long. And this is another thing that's kind of odd about this kind of meditation, because you can get into it and you can sit for 3 or 4 hours and it's kind of fun. It doesn't cause pain to arise. And I do have students that they sit that long, not in a weekend retreat. I'm not going to ask you to sit long on a weekend retreat. But your object of meditation is the feeling of loving kindness, that warm, glowing feeling in the center of your chest, and putting a feeling of happiness or peace and calm, whatever your wish happens to be, putting that in your heart. Then either put yourself in the middle of that and radiate that for 10 minutes, or pick a spiritual friend. A spiritual friend is somebody of the same sex. They are alive, not a member of your family. And I have a lot of complaints about, why can't I be a member of my family? Well, members of the family have a tendency to make you angry sometimes. Okay? I don't know how to say it any other way. So you don't choose a family member to start off with. You pick somebody that you respect, you sincerely do wish them well, but you're not so close to them that you're with them all the time. So a spiritual friend is someone that you sincerely do wish them well, and you radiate that feeling of wellness, of peace and calm, of happiness, and you radiate that to them while they're in the middle of your heart, and you give them a heart hug. Okay, you don't have to try to figure out what direction they are. Oh, they must be over there. No, you don't do that. You keep them in your heart. Now, a lot of people, they have trouble visualizing. You don't have to visualize. If you want to visualize, you can, but it's not a very important part of the meditation. You only want about 5% of your attention on the visualization. You want about 20% on the feeling of the wish that you make, and the rest of it on that radiating feeling. Most people, when they try to visualize and see the friend, it gets cloudy, it gets fuzzy, it's hard to see, it comes and goes, it does all kinds of weird things. And it's not that important. You know who you're sending the loving kindness to. That's enough of a visualization. If you want to say their name, that's up to you. But you want to sit no less than 30 minutes. And I really mean no less than 30 minutes. I don't care if you feel restless. I don't care if you have a pain. I don't care if you go to sleep. Sit no less than 30 minutes. It's kind of difficult only on a 2-day retreat, especially if it's not a in-house retreat, because you don't have the continuity of practice as well as you would have if you were doing the retreat in a different way. But when you get off retreat, try to cut down your speaking and go home and sit. So it's a real a little bit tougher to get any kind of advantage on just a 2-day retreat. Most of the time, my minimum amount of retreat that I'll give somebody is 5 days, because then you're going to have advancement in 5 days. But in 1 or 2 days, the first day is by far the hardest part of the meditation, because your mind is still out there. You're thinking about this and that, and then you lose your spiritual friend, and you start to get sleepy, and you have all of these different hindrances coming up. And that's by far the hardest part of the retreat, is the first day of the meditation. So you get to go through the first day and have a little bit of advantage on the second day, and then you stop. So, and don't expect a whole lot of advantage. Some people can do pretty well by the second day, but it depends on you and how you pay attention to the instructions. The more sincere you are in wishing your friend happiness, the better your meditation becomes. So you have to really do mean that you wish them well. Now, one of the problems that, especially the first day, is sleepiness. Why do you have sleepiness arise? Because your mindfulness is not very good. You're not able to see how mind's attention moves from one thing to another. It's real easy to get caught in thinking about this or that. So every time you're not on your object of meditation and you lose your mindfulness, you're going to have these little quiet thoughts coming up. And then they start to get a little bit bigger, and you start losing your friend completely, and you start to get dreamy, and then you start slumping a little bit, and then before long your head is bobbing. Sound familiar? So what's the cause of that? Why does this arise? Because of your lack of true observation of how mind's attention moves. When you see your mind's attention start to go away, you want to catch it and use the 6 R's. You recognize that your mind is distracted, release the distraction by not holding on to it. Now this is a lot different than the Mahasi method, where you were supposed to, any kind of distraction, you were supposed to note it until it went away. Okay, that's not right effort. The second step to right effort is to not stay with that distraction. Okay? Something unwholesome arises. Anything unwholesome is I am that. Okay? It's the craving that starts to come up. If you keep your attention on that distraction will get bigger and more intense. And with the Mahasi method, they really like pain. They like you to have pain. Pain is a great object of meditation. Well, I'm sorry, pain is a distraction. I don't want you to have pain. I want you to sit in a way that is comfortable, so it doesn't bring the pain up. Because every time pain comes up, with the Mahasi method, they say, put your attention right in the middle of that sensation and see its true nature. Yeah, I did that for 20 years. It doesn't seem to help that much. It brings up pain much more intense. And I don't recommend it. Okay, I like to see people sitting comfortably. I had one lady that she'd never done any meditation, and I started teaching her, and I went to her after her sitting all morning, and I said, well, how's your meditation going? She said, fine, but I can only sit for 45 minutes. And only, okay, why can't you sit longer? Because I'm not used to sitting on the floor. I have so much pain I can't stand it, so I have to get up and start walking. Well, I told her, go sit in a chair. She sat so comfortably, she sat for 4 hours, the first day of a retreat. That's really unusual. So there's no magic in being on the floor. The magic is in your mind. Don't insist that you sit so that you have pain arising. Pain is not your friend. Pain is a hindrance. It stops you from staying with your object of meditation. It causes all kinds of problems. So sit comfortably. Don't fight with whatever arises. Everything about Buddhism is about doing this with your mind, not this. So when you start sitting and you start noticing that you're getting a little bit of sloth and torpor or sleepiness, sit with your back a little bit straighter than is comfortable. Just a little bit. And then you come back to your object of meditation, and of course it's going to start coming up again. And then when you start seeing your back start to slump, you'll catch it more quickly, and you'll be able to let go of it more easily. And that way the sloth and torpor is not going to last for the whole time you're sitting, that it'll last for 5 minutes or even a little bit less. But the trick to overcoming sloth and torpor is staying with your object of meditation, staying with your friend, staying with the feeling of loving kindness, and making a wish for happiness. Take more interest in staying with your friend, and it has to be sincere. You really do wish them well. Okay, that way you'll overcome sloth and torpor much more quickly. Now, one of the things that happens with people is they think that they have to use the 6 R's: recognize, release, relax, resmile, return, repeat. You think you have to do that with every distraction, with every thought that arises, and you don't. If you're staying with your friend and you have a thought arise and it doesn't pull your attention away from your friend, then ignore it. Only use the 6 R's when your mind gets pulled away from your friend and you're just kind of lost in thinking this or that. Please don't fold your arms. So it's a real important thing to understand that you don't need to 6R every thought that comes up. Only when it pulls your attention away from your friend. Then you use the 6 R's and come back. If you have some thoughts, just random thoughts coming through, ignore them if they don't pull your attention away from your friend. Just stay with your friend. Okay? Now, one of the things that I noticed when I was doing so much Mahasi-style meditation was that at the end of the retreat, the students would get together and start talking about their practice. And I started noticing after doing a bunch of them that everybody talked about how hard it was, how much pain there was, how they didn't understand a lot of the things that they were told to do. And the fear of the getting off of retreat and getting back into real life, because when you're practicing Mahasi and you're eating a meal, you're picking up the food and moving and moving and moving and moving and moving, and you're doing everything really, really, really slowly. And what good is that in your daily life? Try to do that when you get home and your family members are going to say, "What's the matter with you? You crazy?" So it's not real. There's a culture shock getting off of retreat. That doesn't happen with this kind of meditation. There's no culture shock. You just feel more happy. And that's nice in itself. When people get off retreat, after I give them a 10-day retreat, they start saying things like, geez, I wish it lasted a couple days longer. You know, I feel so happy. And they, because of the kind of suttas that I use when I give a Dhamma talk, they actually understand more and more clearly what the meditation is for and how to use it in your daily life. One of the things that I tell people is that I wrote a book called Life is Meditation, Meditation is Life. Just because you think meditation is about sitting, that's only a small part of it. It's about living. And when you become familiar with how hindrances arise, and you can recognize them, then do you get hindrances in your daily life? Well, of course, everybody does. But now you're going to be able to recognize it. Now you're going to be able to let it go. And it's going to lead towards a happier life all the time. You see, the first part of meditation is not sitting. That's the last part that the Buddha talked about. The first part of sitting is practicing your generosity. Oh, what does that mean? Generally, generosity means that you have to give something to somebody. And it's almost always material stuff when you start thinking about generosity. But actually, when you start practicing smiling, you can give your smile away. Give it to other people. You can give your speech away and say things that are going to make other people happy. You can help people overcome their suffering by helping them in one way or another. That's what generosity really is. It's not just about, I'm going to give this to you. It's not material. It is realizing that this is part of the meditation, and the more you practice your generosity and giving kind words and kind thoughts and kind actions to other people, it not only makes you happy, but it makes other people happy. And isn't that what compassion is? It's not a philosophy. Philosophy is a lot of words without any actions. Buddhism is not about philosophy. Buddhism is about action. It's about doing and helping other people other than yourself to be happy. I love to go into stores where there's a little kid that's crying. They found out with the psychology things that when little kids cry, they have a certain pitch in their voice that really makes you pay attention to them, and you don't want to be around them anymore. Well, I love being around little kids because I can walk up and I don't touch them. I just start smiling a little bit and I radiate loving kindness to them. Within a minute or minute and a half, all of a sudden they stop crying and they look up at me like, "What are you doing?" And then I say something to the parent that's jangled nerves because of the crying. and tell them what a nice little child they have and how lucky they are to have somebody like that. Well, isn't that practicing generosity? Isn't that what generosity really means? Help other people overcome their suffering as much as you possibly can. That's generosity. The second part of meditation, and I've already mentioned it a little bit, is keeping your precepts without breaking them. Now, I know in Asia, one of the favorite things to do is tell little white lies. A little white lie is a lie. As soon as you say it, there's a quiet voice in your mind that says, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have said that. I know it's not true. Well, what happens when you tell a white lie? You have a guilty feeling coming up. And the guilty feeling is the cause of hindrances arising. Breaking any of the precepts, and by far the hardest precepts to keep, are speech. Especially gossip. What is gossip? Gossip is making up stories about somebody that's not there to defend themselves. It's telling lies, making up stories, and causing a lot of problems for other people. Also, cursing. I have somebody that I taught him for years. Cursed like a sailor. I mean, just all the time using foul language. And he'd come and he'd want to do a retreat with me. I said, okay, fine. But he had hindrances for, if he did a 2-week retreat, he had hindrances for 10 or 11 days before his mind settled down. And by the time his mind settled down, it was time to get off retreat. Well, he did that to himself for years and complained about not progressing in his meditation. So I told him to stop cursing. Yeah. And I did it anyway. Eventually, he finally figured out that what I was telling him was true. And you don't use foul language, you use language that goes to the heart of other people, that makes them feel good. Anybody that uses foul language, what's in their mind when they're doing the cursing? Is it uplifted? Is it happy? No. It's filled with aversion, hatred, dislike, frustration, anxiety. Well, all of those, when you use that kind of language, causes a guilty mind to arise. So when you sit and you start purifying your mind by doing the sitting meditation, you have a lot of hindrances coming up, and you have to learn how to handle that. There's a lot of people that they do Buddhist ceremonies where, we're going to take the precepts now, and they just mouth the words. They're not taking them for real. When I give a retreat, I generally just give a 10-day retreat because you don't need any more than that. By the end of 10 days, you understand what you're doing and how to do it. But I have you recite the precepts every day, not as a rite and ritual, but as a reminder to keep the precepts without breaking them. And I've had people go, yeah, okay, how long do I have to keep the precepts? Well, start at 100 years and go up from there. That's how important they are. When you keep your precepts without breaking them for a period of time, and I say a period of time, a year and a half, 2 years, you're going to understand that your mindfulness is really good and sharp. And you know what you're going to say before you say it, and you know what you're going to do before you do it. So then you have time to decide whether it's the right thing to do or not. And understand that if you break the precept, that's going to be a problem for you. And you are causing your own suffering. You can't blame somebody else for your suffering, because you do it to yourself by breaking precepts. It's not a maybe. This is the way it works. Honest. I'll give you an example. There was a man that he was a Mahayana monk from Korea and came to Burma while I was there. And he wanted to change and become a Theravada monk. Theravada monks don't eat in the evening. But he was used to eating in the evening because the Mahayana take an evening meal. And after a few days, after he became a Theravada monk, he started cooking his own meals in the evening. He went from being able to sit for 3 hours without moving. But because of the guilty mind, he knew he was breaking that precept. He couldn't sit for more than 15 minutes, and the restlessness was so incredibly bad he had to get up. Now this is what breaking the precepts does to you. And it's not a sometime practice. This is an all-the-time practice. That's why life is meditation. Meditation is life. And you can't blame somebody else for your problems. Your problems are yours because of past actions. What you do with what arises in the present dictates what happens in the future. If you fight with what arises in the present, you can look forward to having that same kind of problem come up over and over again until you learn to stop fighting it. This is what the 6 R's are all about. They're learning how to practice right effort. And it's real important. If you keep the 6 R's going with your daily life as well as with your meditative life, it can take you all the way to arahatship. It can take you to the final step to get off the wheel of samsara. I have students that are very close to that. They haven't quite become arahats yet, but they're working on it. I told them if they become an arahat, then I was going to be their student. But as you go deeper in the meditation, you start becoming more and more wholesome, more and more aware of what you're doing before you do it. You start having a lighter mind. It changes your sense of humor. And you start laughing with things because it's nice. I love to be around animals because they're such clowns. They make me laugh all the time. Or seeing something that's incredibly beautiful, like flowers, or I love architecture and seeing the different way things that are made. It makes me happy. My mind is uplifted because of a change of perspective that happens when you do this kind of practice. Please don't sit with your arms crossed. That is disrespectful. The more you can have an uplifted mind, the happier you become. The happier you become, the more you can give that happiness away to other people. Do you want to affect the world around you in a positive way? Smile. Every time you smile, you are practicing the Eightfold Path at that time. Every time you use the 6 R's, you are practicing the Eightfold Path at that time. It's not a maybe. This is really the way it works. You know, you hear a lot about the Four Noble Truths. What's the first noble truth? Everything in life is suffering. That's not the first noble truth. That's not what the Buddha said. And so many people are hearing that everything in life is suffering. Well, why do I want to try to practice what the Buddha is teaching? It's not worth it. It's so downward leading. Everything in life is suffering. Well, that's really pessimistic, isn't it? But that's not the first noble truth. That's a bad translation of somebody that has a second language of English. They don't really understand the intricacies of what they're saying. There is suffering in life. Well, you don't have to be a genius to know that. There is suffering occasionally, but it's not always there. There's a cause of suffering. What's a cause? I've been talking about it all day. Craving. I like it. I want it to be the way I want it to be. That's craving. What's the third noble truth? How to get rid of the craving. The cessation of the craving. Well, how do you do that? Well, by the fourth noble truth. The path leading to the cessation of suffering. What is that path? It's the 6 R's. Now you see how important the 6 R's are becoming. Every time you use the 6 R's, because you're letting go of craving, you're purifying your mind. And you bring that pure mind to a smile. The mind is light, your mind is alert, your mind is uplifted. And bring that smiling, uplifted mind back to your object of meditation, your spiritual friend, and stay with your spiritual friend as long as you can. That's the 6 R's. It works. That is a for real. It's not a maybe. If you follow the directions like I'm giving you, which is following the directions that's straight from the suttas, I'm not making this stuff up. When you follow these directions precisely, your progress in the meditation is going to be so fast you won't believe it. Your understanding of how this process works is going to be very fast. You have to understand, when the Buddha was around teaching, he was teaching people that were not well educated. A lot of farmers, they didn't have a lot of time to mess around. They had to work on their farms. They had to do things all the time. He had to be able to give them something that worked. It worked quickly, and they could see the end results. They could see results of practicing this way. Now, you get into some of the Buddhist practices, it might take you 2 or 3 years to figure out what the meditation is all about. That is not what the Buddha taught. Not the way that he taught. He taught people smile. Taught people be happy. Whenever he gave a Dhamma talk, he would first talk about generosity, and then he would talk about keeping the precepts, and then he would talk about getting into the heavenly realms, into the Devalokas, and the advantage of doing things that were kind and uplifting and happy. Then he would talk about when people's minds were open, accepting, excited about hearing about this stuff. Then he would talk about the Four Noble Truths and how to actually do the practice. By the time he had died, there was 60 million Buddhists in a land here of Brahmins. He converted a lot of people, and he wasn't interested in converting anybody. He was just interested in giving the Dhamma. So, sit no less than 30 minutes. I know all about it. I can see the clock as well as anybody. When you're sitting is good, sit longer. Okay? You start sitting and your mind all of a sudden settles down and you can stay with your object or you stay with your friend for a few minutes. Just stay with them as long as you feel comfortable. You might sit for 45 minutes, you might even sit for an hour. Don't make it an hour because that's what you were doing with the other sitting or the other meditation. Sit for as long as you're comfortable for half an hour. Now, when you do your walking meditation, if you practice a Mahasya method like I did, that meant that you walked really, 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 really slowly. I want you to walk at a normal pace, like you walking from here to the shop or here to your car. Walk at that pace. You're walking for exercise. After you sit for a period of time, your blood starts to settle. And you need to get up and you need to stretch your muscles a little bit because you're not used to sitting so much. So walk with your eyes down, 6 or 8 feet, something like that. And stay with your spiritual friend. Now, at first your walking is going to be not so easy because you're not used to it. You're used to thinking about this and that while you're walking. But as soon as you notice you're thinking about this or that, then use the 6 R's gently. Don't force your mind around. and come back to your spiritual friend and wish them well, and try to stay with your spiritual friend as long as you can. But you be gentle with yourself. You don't jerk your mind around. You don't try to stop your mind from thinking. Thoughts are not your enemy. Thoughts are your friends. And they are your teacher, showing you where your attachment is. So be nice to them. Don't criticize yourself because I'm supposed to be better than this. You're as good as you are, and that's fine. There's no problem with that. Stay with your spiritual friend as much as you can. When you're not able to do it, don't criticize yourself. Just play like it's a game. You know how kids have these computer games and they're playing and playing and then they lose? What do? Start over again, right? That's the kind of mind you want to develop. Play it again. Play with it. Don't be harsh or hard on yourself because your mind doesn't do what you want it to. You'd have to train it, but you have to train it with a soft hand, not a harsh mind. Walk at least 15 minutes. Now, if you're walking and it's real easy to stay with your spiritual friend and you want to walk a little bit longer, okay, walk a little bit longer. You can walk up to a half an hour. That's good. No problem. If I was giving a 10-day retreat, by the end of, day 6 or 7, you would be sitting for longer periods of time, and then I would have you doing very peculiar things, running up and down stairs to get your heart beating, because you're starting to sit for 3 hours and 4 hours. Now, what I teach is a kind of jhana. And I know that there's a lot of teachers that they have a fear of jhanas. Oh, it doesn't lead to nibbana. But I teach the kind of jhana that the Buddha taught. And it had vipassana and samatha practice together while you're in the jhana. What is jhana? What exactly does jhana mean? Almost anybody you talk to about that word, they're going to say that it means one point of concentration, and that's not what the Buddha taught. Jhana is a level of your understanding. When you're in the first jhana, there are certain things that happen. You go to the next jhana, it's like a different meditation. And you're teaching yourself more and more clearly how to do the practice. So jhana has had a bad rap for a long time, and I very much wondered, why are people so afraid of jhana? I mean, you look at the word vipassana, and it's mentioned a few times in the suttas, but not very much. And you look at the word jhana, and it's all over the place. So what do you think the Buddha taught? He didn't teach you to be afraid of jhana. He taught jhana. And actually, when you go back and look at the history, before, while he was still a bodhisattva, he was practicing arupa jhanas. That means immaterial realms, without any preliminary of going through the material jhanas. And he discovered the first 4 jhanas and how important they are for your understanding. And that's why we have these jhanas first. Levels of understanding. When you get to the 2nd jhana, all of a sudden you start to get a lot more confidence in the practice, and you start going, yeah, I see that I'm progressing. How long does it take you to do that with other kinds of meditation? You do it in 1 or 2 days? No. 1 or 2 years? Maybe. So the jhanas are very important. And the word samadhi, according to Rice Davies, he wrote the dictionary, Pali-English dictionary. He said, Sama means tranquil, Di means wisdom. But samadhi, whenever you talk to anybody, they say it means concentration. No, it doesn't. That's what happened after the Buddha had died for about 240 years or so later. The Brahmins started getting jealous because the monks, the Buddhist monks, had the support of King Asoka, and they had the best food and they had the best places to live and stay. And the Brahmins decided that they wanted some of that, so they started taking on the robes. But they didn't know what the Buddha taught. And they started taking some of the words and changing the meaning of the words. Samadhi means concentration, because that's how they did their meditation, with concentration. So it's a real interesting phenomena that so many people are afraid of concentration. And this is what the Buddha mainly taught. But it's not the same thing as the kind of meditation that's being taught today. A lot of the meditations, I don't care whether it's Buddhist or Sikh or Hindu or Muslim even, they are teaching a kind of one-pointed concentration. What does that mean? One-pointed concentration. Your mind is on your object of meditation. It doesn't matter what that object of meditation is, whether they're praying to some kind of God or they're doing some kind of concentration practice. Their mind gets distracted away. Now, the instructions are let go of the distraction and immediately come back to your object of meditation. Okay, that seems fair enough. What I'm showing you is a little bit different. Your mind is on your object of meditation, it gets distracted. Let go of the distraction, same. Now, relax the tension and tightness, letting go of the craving. So when you let go of the craving and you smile and have that light mind, you're bringing a pure mind back to your object of meditation. And that changes the entire meditation. That one extra step. What other people are doing and immediately coming back, they're bringing that craving with them. Okay, that takes you off the Buddha's teaching. That takes you away from the final end result that the Buddha was interested in, which was Nibbana. And Nibbana, or I think they call it here Nirvana. It's Sanskrit. I don't like Sanskrit. It's hard on the ear. There's a lot of R's in it. So I like Nibbana. Ni means no. Bana means fire. Okay. Now, the Buddha described craving as burning. Everything is burning. What is it burning with? It's burning with craving. So Nibbana means no more fire. So your mind becomes cool. Because you don't have that craving in your mind anymore. You're able to recognize it and relax and let it go. So it's a different kind of jhana that the Buddha was talking about. And of course, there's going to be people that practice other kinds of practices that are going to complain about that. No, that's not what the Buddha taught. Well, it's in the suttas. It's very plain. And when you look up the directions for, let's say, mindfulness of breathing, that seems to be a favorite of everybody, although it's only mentioned 8 times in the suttas. Loving kindness is mentioned many hundreds of times in the suttas. Which one do you think he taught most? But mindfulness of breathing. You understand when you take a long in-breath, you understand when you take a long out-breath. You understand when you take a short in-breath, you understand when you take a short out-breath. Now, what's the key word here? Did you hear me say nostril, nostril tip, upper lip, abdomen? Did you hear me say any of those things? No. Why? It's not in the instructions. It says very simply, you understand when you take a long breath and when it's short. Okay. It doesn't say you focus on the breath. It says you understand what the breath is doing while it's doing it. Then the rest of the instructions are, he trains thus. Now we're getting down to the actual instruction. And the actual instruction is 2 sentences. That's all. The first is, he experiences the entire body on the in-breath, and he experiences the entire body on the out-breath. That doesn't say breath of body, or body of breath, I guess you'd say it. It doesn't say anything other than on the in-breath, you experience your body. On the out-breath, you experience your body. That's it. Then, this is the key that changes the entire meditation away from one-pointed concentration. He trains thus. On the in-breath, I shall tranquilize a bodily formation. On the out-breath, I tranquilize a bodily formation. What does tranquilize mean? Well, a lot of people will say, well, my mind becomes tranquil when I'm practicing this. Well, but that's not... The words in Pali are pasambaya. Pasambaya has different meaning depending on the words around it. So when it says, he trains thus, pasambaya can be a verb, it can be a noun, it can be an adjective, it can be an adverb, depending on the words around it. But when it says, he trains thus, it turns it into an action verb. And what it says is, you tranquilize on the in-breath and you tranquilize on the out-breath. Tranquilize what? The bodily formation. Oh, isn't that something? See how it all interconnects. The Buddha was, at first, he was just blowing people's minds, because there would be some Brahmins that had all of these philosophical questions that were really complicated, and they went to him and they tried to trick him into making a mistake. And he would show them the Dhamma that was so simple and so easy to understand that they just didn't know what to do with it. This is too simple. This is too easy. This practice is simple. It's not a complicated practice. Anytime your mind is distracted, let the distraction be there by itself. Relax and smile and come back and have fun with the meditation. That's something you don't ever hear meditation teachers say. Smile, laugh. Oh, geez, you're supposed to laugh too. And have fun. Yeah. That's what I tell everybody in every retreat that I give them. If you're not having fun, go someplace else. If you're over serious, you have a mind that's heavy. And you have a mind that thinks a lot and tries to come up with all kinds of reasons why this doesn't work because it's too simple. I've had people that have been doing meditation for 10 and 20 years come to me and tell me, boy, I wish you would have been around when I first started out. I wish I would have been around when I first started out. I would have not had 20 years of hard practice. Anyway, so now is time to do a sitting. Sit till the bell rings for lunch. Sit with your back nicely straight, your chest up and out a little bit. Don't move. You can move as much as he does. Don't move your body at all. So sit comfortably. Stay with your spiritual friend. Stay with that smiling mind. Wish your friend happiness. Okay? Smile. Now you have an idea of what it's like to keep your smile going, so keep it while you're eating. Okay? And come back at 1 o'clock here. Okay.
Will be a repeat of the instructions, a repeat capsule type instructions when you come back at 1 o'clock for the people that came in late to hear them again. Okay?